It says
Yep.
Reuse Innovation Center.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Yep.
So welcome all. What we're going to do is a brief overview of the whole project for new folks between 11:30 and 12, which is you. And then we're going to just briefly refer to the first couple of phases, the waste characterization and the waste diversion analysis. We did spend a lot of time talking about those in previous sessions. And this has been, each new session that we've done on this has been cumulative and kind of tried to include what we've done up until that point. But we can't, at this point, spend a lot of time on the waste characterization and diversion phase. However, if you'd like to know more about that, we have the documents, the reports that we created, linked to on our website. So you can dive into as much detail as you like. And what this particular session is focusing on is citing considerations is what the newest information that we have. It's most recent effort that we're currently engaged in now, which come out of the conceptual plan, which in turn come out of the initial characterization of the waste stream, in which we did a lot of deep dive analysis, and then identified what could be diverted and how and by who. Makes sense so far? Okay, who are we? Dave Bennick, who's you just saw a minute ago, is the CEO of Reuse Consulting, and he has done a vast amount of work on reuse centers and helping people start reuse centers all over the country, and in fact in 14 other countries apparently. So he's our extreme expert on this project. We couldn't have done better. I am the admin lead. I work for Sustainable Hudson Valley. I report to Melissa Everett, who will be joining us around noon. I kind of keep things organized on this project. And of course, Melissa is our driving force at Sustainable Hudson Valley. We contracted with Ulster County last fall to do a feasibility study for a Reuse Innovation Center. The goal of Ulster County is to divert as much waste as they can and to find better ways to do it. And, Ulster is a special place because it has its own Department of the Environment, which most counties do not. And it has a lot of, impetus from the population to do better, to do something about climate change, to do something about waste, to, improve diversion rates. So yeah, initial planning and strategy was with Ulster County, evaluate how a Reuse Innovation Center can help and how we can create one and the best way to do that in Ulster County. That's the ultimate goal, is to give them a blueprint for creating a Reuse Innovation Center and all the tools they might need to decide how and where and what to do. And, throughout, this is the overview of the whole project. And we are at stage 5 at this point. And again, you can read our reports from understanding the waste stream, identifying diversion opportunities, and the conceptual plan. And the conceptual plan, of course, is an ongoing thing. And in part, we're updating it as we go along from feedback from folks like yourself that attend, these sessions, because the whole point is to serve the people in Ulster County, and especially the folks that are, currently involved in reuse or affected by reuse, businesses that are already there, haulers, and of course, UCRA, the Ulster County Resource Recovery folks. Any questions on that so far? Okay. This is a concept that Dave had created, I think, some time ago for a Reuse Innovation Center. It is not necessarily what ours should or will look like. It's just an example. of what every use innovation center should contain. In other words, it might not be this size, this proportion, etc. And it might contain things that aren't here because, you know, a reuse innovation center can be specific to the place that it's in, and it's intended to interact with the community very closely and meet specific community needs. But, you know, these things I think that are here are pretty much probably going to be anywhere. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah. So, well, let me just say, if you know, the whole where did the idea of the Reuse Innovation Center come from? And basically, this is our 31st year of being in the circular economy, and what we've learned is that a lot of businesses are doing this on their own, and they're doing it at a small scale, and they're doing it with very little money, and they're struggling, in their own way, or maybe they're doing well, but they're just not doing volume. And so what we were looking for was something that would solve all the problems all at once. And by working together and co-locating and having a synergistic approach, having a cooperative approach, not a competitive approach, the we seem to solve a lot of those problems. And so I took all the ideas and all of the things we had learned over the years and tried to package them up in what we call the Reuse Innovation Center. And so you have multiple businesses, um, all the way from removing material to installing material. And it isn't just building materials, of course, it's all sorts of, there were 25 different material types that we identify when we walk around the Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center as an example. So, um, and so if you look, you can see there's an indoor space and an outdoor space. And, usually outdoor space is much less expensive than the indoor space, and a lot of materials can live outside. So maybe they're undercover, but they're not in a heated space, let's say. And so that's, that's how this worked out. We have businesses that generate material, like deconstruction companies or hauling companies. We have companies that need material, like people that make reclaimed wood furniture or artwork, um, sculptures, things like that. And we have service base, where the deconstruction service, where you disassemble buildings, the hauling service, the repair service, where you're repairing things that people need repaired, or that the center, materials that are around the center that need to be processed or repaired. And so that's some of the things that are happening in that image there.
Dave,
Just briefly as background, I'm sorry, was somebody going to say something?
I was just going to ask a quick question about that layout. Dave, is that an actual schematic of what you've created out west?
No, no. It serves as a wish, like best wish kind of thing. I don't know if you want to go back, Barbara, go back one. Um, uh, but basically, it's a completely square building that's 30,000 square feet, let's say, and it's just make believe, right? We don't have that, and we're used to adapting to what we can afford. And what we can afford is usually what no one else wants for a building. I mean, and they're pretty bad buildings sometimes, but leaky roof or little heat or shabby exterior kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing that Ulster County probably doesn't need if they want to do this at a volume, like instead of doing it at kicking it around. If they really want to do this, that money has to be likely invested in a decent location. That's part of today's theme, focus is site consideration. And we're going to get a lot more into this.
I think it's worth mentioning that Dave started his first reuse innovation center from scratch without anybody's help, without any government assistance, with, just because they wanted to do it. And he got together with other like-minded folks and found ways, so
Right.
that's what he's talking about. But we're in a wonderful opportunity here, and that the county actually wanted this study done because they want to have a reuse innovation center. And I think that's something we should be very proud of. So very quickly, because I don't want us to get behind, this is kind of how we started the project. Dave, and that's Melissa there with the blue hat, my boss, met with lots of stakeholders in Ulster County, site visits to UCRA transfer stations. He visited numerous places. We analyzed all the data we could find on the materials flows, whether it be UCRA reports, DEC reports, the zero waste implementation plan, and some of the things that they dug into, et cetera, et cetera. Some points from the waste stream observations that Dave did, and Dave, spent time on the tipping floor actually seeing what came by for a day, so he could get a real sense of what was going on. It's a lot of contaminated low-value waste, but a C&D stream, which has a lot of opportunity in it, construction and demolition debris is C&D. Plenty of the right material that we could use in an RIC. And of course, acknowledging that some of the waste stream is already being diverted by local reuse stores, etc. This is a chart that shows, basically where we're driving all this waste to. And, these are trucks that sit and idle for a long time and have very low miles per gallon. And, there's that impact on the environment that we need to take into account. And that's a lot of waste. And what we want to do is keep things in the community and not throw them away and not dump them in a landfill, but, put them back into the economy. And the other thing to mention is repair. Repair is another thing that keeps things out of the landfill, and repair cafes have cropped up all over the valley. When I started with Sustainable Hudson Valley 2 years ago, there were 35. I believe there are about 45 now, and they're still popping up. Each one is its own grassroots effort by local folks who know how to fix things and want to not only help people by fixing them as volunteers for free, but also help show them how to fix them themselves. This keeps things out of the landfill, but it also helps the community. Helps save money, and it helps people be empowered to take control of their own stuff. Any questions on any of that? Okay. All right, what time is it? It's 11:53. Wow, we're early. What
I
do
can
we
ask
do?
questions. I can ask questions if you.
Sure, absolutely. Ask questions. We love questions.
Yeah, so this is so amazing and really excited to see that there's support from the county to do this. I'm wondering how this reuse innovation center, or how you envision, or how the county envisions this reuse innovation center partnering with existing like recycling facilities and like waste sites. Is there like appetite for further like machinery to help break down particular waste streams that they don't have the capacity to do today, and that be part of this project as well? What does that look like? Or yeah, I'm just curious.
Dave, do you want to talk about that? Because you've dived in more.
Yeah. Here's the rule of thumb. Don't count anybody out. Don't count any materials out. What we focus on is reuse, and that includes repair, remanufacturing, and kind of recycling in that family. But our focus is mainly on reuse and remanufacturing repair. And when it comes to materials, but our absolute mission is to look at the entire waste stream and see what is the maximum amount that we can divert from that. And obviously, a lot of that material is well beyond being reused. So we've been looking at plastic film recycling. We've been looking at other types of plastics. We were looking at mattresses for a while, all those things, we already, like I said, we have 25 material types when it comes to textiles and appliances and furniture and building materials and on and
Yep.
on and on.
Yep.
But I think that, these partnering businesses, that could be, they may not be located in the Reuse Innovation Center, but they are definitely closely related. Any kind of recycling that's going on, electronics recycling, or we've been talking with people that convert cars to electric from diesel to electric or something like that. And so you see that this, the Reuse Innovation Center is going to open up possibilities, and it's going to open up the waste stream and tap into it in many different ways. And when you start tapping into a pile of material and you've diverted 50% of it for reuse, it's not that hard to spend a few more minutes pulling out the recyclables, you see. But if you don't have that infrastructure in place, it's harder to imagine it.
If you were asking about whether we get involved in basically what would be heavy manufacturing, like breaking things down ourselves on site,
Yeah.
I think to the degree that some of that is regulated materials, which we would not really want to get into, because of the expense and because of the complexity and because of the legal regulations. There's things we'd probably want to avoid doing. Ultimately, however, it will be up to Ulster County to see what they really want to do. But that, of course, also involves getting a lot more space. And, that also affects what locations we could be in versus a light manufacturing type of zoning, which would be much more feasible for us.
Got it. Yeah, I was curious if the county itself is thinking about adding its own additional recycling centers, additional equipment to handle more products, how that interfaces with something like this. But it sounds like, it's up to the county, and you'll make yourself available depending on what type of material and what the regulations are around that material are.
Yeah, and Dave has mentioned before that, this Reuse Innovation Center would definitely have a recycling area, and we could conceivably collect stuff and then send it on, to whatever organization might be handling that material.
Awesome.
And I think at some point, Dave, you mentioned that we could collect things that aren't normally recycled, but could be, because basically you'd want to have it in sufficient quantity to make it worthwhile. And then that could be, a way to recycle additional items. And I think porcelain was something that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think when we go to a different region, we look at where is the recycling. Sometimes that's 500 miles away, 800 miles away, and it isn't cost effective to send the materials there unless you send them there in huge quantities. And maybe even then it's not worth it. But that's something we want to look at. I would say that UCRA is amazing, and we're really excited that they are looking at mattresses, for example, frankly, so we don't have to. But
Right.
but that's an example of this kind of teamwork approach, that they are this massive facility, that two facilities that handle lots of material, and they already recycle a lot of material and they compost a lot of material, and we want to work really closely with them to pull out all the reusable material, to help them, enable them to do more recycling, through the act of sorting material and reducing the load that they have to deal with. When I worked on the tipping floor there, I learned a lot about how they operate, and I'm excited to to find out what kind of synergistic effects there are of having this effort, to divert reusable materials and have basically hands on the waste stream, eyes on the waste stream, and just how many recyclable things can be pulled out as well, because they already recycle a lot of metal and a lot of cardboard right off the tipping floor. They pull it whenever they have a chance. They are pulling cardboard and metal for, just two examples.
Awesome.
Can I ask about the tipping floor, Dave, or Barbara? So that the pictures of your transfer stations look like every transfer station I've ever seen. So in terms of, besides literally pulling material as it's coming in, is there discussion about either, incentives or policies around source separation at the sites themselves before it gets to the tipping floor? Or what are the different ways that you anticipate dealing with that so that you're not having to pull it off the tipping floor as it's coming off the back of a truck?
I'm just gonna escape from full screen here because I expect to see other people coming in at this point, and I don't know if it's me.
Well, I'll answer that while you.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, because I don't see anybody either. So, one of the great things about working with all of these stakeholder groups is that you're in touch with and you are interacting with and educating all of these stakeholders and all of these recycling, government, industry, all of these folks are part of this process, and we're going to be informing them about different things, especially in our conclusions, about different things that can be done to boost and help the Reuse Innovation Center thrive, not just survive, but thrive, like incentives and there's talk of deconstruction ordinance, where you mandate deconstruction over demolition, things like that probably won't happen all at once, but maybe over time, some of those things could be there to help us divert more material. But we probably will start with low-hanging fruit, and we are looking at, as you'll find out today, co-locating at least a collection facility near Accra that will it will be, pulling things off people's trucks right before they go into the dump, the transfer station. So we're already thinking about different things that we can do. And we're still at 4 people.
Yeah, we're still at 4 people. What's going on? I had 14 people that signed up.
I'm just wondering if, yeah.
Melissa was supposed to join at noon too. Well,
Like
I'm going to give it a couple minutes because,
Yeah, I had some trouble, but
yeah, I'm not getting any emails from anybody that's like panicking or, I don't know.
yeah. Let's see. I'll text Melissa.
So where are you two from anyway? Let's start with Casey.
I'm in Saugerties, so
Cool.
just north. Yep.
What do you do? How are you involved in reuse?
I have a consultancy focused on circularity and circularity strategies for businesses. So I work on the corporate side of things to help, from a high level, help design products for circularity, extended life cycles, and ultimately, enable reuse or regeneration at the end. I also have a integrated partnership with an organization called Circle Economy based out of the Netherlands. And I don't know if you all have seen there's like a global circularity gap report that goes out once a year. It's pretty popular through them, but Yeah, so they're sort of a big name in circularity in the EU. And I'm helping them sort of bring that to the States.
Very cool.
You're
How about you,
just up
Greg?
the road.
What's that, Dave?
Somebody new. Oh, yeah, it's me.
That's
Um,
Melissa.
That's cool, Casey. What about Gretchen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen Worth. I'm based in Ithaca and work for the Susan Christofferson Center for Community Planning. And we're one of the founding partners of CROWD, which stands for Circularity, Reuse, Zero Waste Development. So we work statewide, and we would love to have somebody from Ulster County join us because we have partners from the Capital Region, Rochester, Central New York, Southern Tier, and we're working to create a circular building and construction economy in New York State. So through CROWD, Dave and I have worked together and come across each other in a number of different places in New York State. And so very interested in this idea of a reuse innovation center, which we need desperately all over the state. And so congratulations to Ulster County for getting this going. The other thing that CROWD is interested in is incorporating more robust building materials solutions into county solid waste management plans throughout New York State. So Tompkins County, Cayuga County right now are developing draft 10-year plans. We've been looking at Ulster County's plan. So a lot of different reasons that I'm really interested in what you're doing. But thank you for including me today.
Absolutely. We're glad you could join us. Well, Melissa, we had 14 people sign up for this. And as far as I can tell, there's nobody in the waiting room.
Yeah, it looked like a pretty high-powered crowd. So I'm Melissa Everett. I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Hudson Valley. I managed to be in the right place at the right time for us to be hosts of the Repair Cafe, which is 45 community partners strong in the Hudson Valley, and to be positioned to work with Ulster County on this initiative, which I'm super excited about. And I'll just mention that we've done a regional climate action strategy and roadmap thingy that includes a materials management component. And that has led us into conversations with the recycling coordinators and resource recovery agency folks in additional counties who are interested in, upping the game in terms of collaboration to divert waste, and especially starting with textiles and building materials. So we're starting to see the potential for, expansion as this thing gets traction.
Well, I guess we should maybe get started and folks can catch up. I don't know. I'm not seeing anybody in the emails either, so. You have an opinion, Melissa?
My opinion is start.
Okay. Well, you already saw this. This was intended for me to just mention briefly what the overview was and where we are right now in the project. We've been through the first, let's say, 2 phases, because as I said before, the conceptualization goes on based on feedback from stakeholders and will be finalized, once we have gotten farther through, because we don't want to totally finalize it. We want to be open to new ideas as it go along. And we've been working most recently on siting requirements that are based on our concept of what an RIC should look like in Ulster County. And that's what this session will deal with. This is just one example of a part of the output of the characterization of the waste. Figuring out, what the top opportunities are for a reuse innovation center and what can be done with them. I'm not going to go into any detail here. It's just an example. As I mentioned, there's a lot on our website, and I'll put that link in the chat a little bit. But this just gives you an idea of just a cross section of some of the things we looked at. And here are some of the kinds of businesses that actually exist already and that could exist further or be developed, because the Reuse Innovation Center can be an incubator for small businesses that want to get into reuse businesses. Any questions on that part? And now we'll get into the conceptualization, or the conceptual plan, as the county calls it. Just an overview, what is a Reuse Innovation Center? Dave talked about it a bit before, but this is the definition actually from Dave's website. It pools the resources of multiple business organizations into a single facility, allowing them to cooperate in the creation of a local circular economy. And when we say single facility, there are different models all over the country. It doesn't necessarily need to be one building. It may be, cooperative effort between different locations. What we will finally wind up with is up to Ulster County, but they seem to be focused primarily on having one location. So Dave will get more into the details of how the order in which you create this effort should happen, but it matters a lot what order you do things in if you want to be successful. It's good that there be materials to start with if you want to be able to train people on how to do materials. So you have to have materials. In order to have materials, you would, deconstruction is a good business to start with as an anchor business, because that immediately starts bringing in materials. But I'll let him get into that in the next slide. Location, obviously, we have to care where it is. It needs to be near Accra. We've kind of created drawn a line in the sand, sort of, to say that it should be within 10 miles of Accra, meaning the main transfer station in Kingston. Or maybe it's technically in the town of Ulster, it's on Flatbush Avenue. You need skilled workers, right, to work at the RIC or any of the associated businesses. We've talked to a number of people who've let us know that there is a dearth of skilled workers in Ulster County for reuse types of businesses and for deconstruction. So that's something that needs to be handled in the appropriate order. But the Reuse Innovation Center can provide training. Deconstruction, I'll let Dave talk about, and then establishing core programs in businesses. Certain things are kind of fundamental and work synergistically together. And of course, we want the RIC, and this is very important, for it to be flexible enough, location-wise, function-wise, funding-wise, to be able to grow in scope as new functions may be needed. And of course, the physical characteristics we talked about a little bit already. Any questions on this so far? Dave, I'm going to let you go ahead with this.
Okay, so Barbara and Melissa and everyone, since probably the last 2 weeks, there are now 2 more reuse innovation centers in the world.
Yay.
At least they got their funding anyway. So both of them are in Washington State, and we're excited about them. They are different, which just tells you how different, conditions. One is in a rural community, one is in an urban community. One's going to be bigger, one's going to be smaller. It's just, one has lower rent, the other one has higher rent. It's going to be interesting. And so now we're starting to network our reuse innovation centers together better than we have in the past. So that's something exciting. I just wanted to share that with everybody. Sorry.
Well, congrats.
Yeah. Yeah, we have 4 soon, hopefully soon to be 5 in the Northwest, and they are yeah, in areas of relative high supply and relative high demand. So we're going to be redistributing, uh, redistributing materials throughout the region better now. Okay, so but how do all of these things get started? What are the steps? When you don't have any funding, the steps might be compressed, or it might be different. A lot of times you're looking for opportunities and you just have to move when you get them. We like deconstruction as a good starting point, and here's why. Deconstruction is a way of collecting materials where you get paid to collect materials. You're not a thrift store that's just waiting for people to donate material. You're not a consignment store where you're waiting for people to consign materials. You're actually getting paid to provide a service, and the byproduct of that service is a lot of reusable materials that you now own for free. And so that's why deconstruction can be a good starting point. And so you might say that, okay, the next phase is once you get something like that going, you have an operation, it's moving forward, you're generating material, you better start, before you accumulate a bunch of material and get out of control, you need to get your anchor operations and core business in place. And that really is often centered around a retail brick and mortar type location. Then you could say, well, we're going to bring in partnering reuse businesses. But just because that is in phase 3 doesn't mean that you weren't talking to people before phase 1. Okay, so that's an important point I wanted to bring up, which is these are hard and fast, kind of like, oh, here's phase 1, phase 2, but it doesn't mean that you're not thinking of phase 4 before when you're at phase 0, But yeah, once you get an operation going, you've got a physical location, you're starting to bring in these synergistic businesses that are helping and working with each other. They're working together. So, and then finally, you might have additional businesses like a repair business, something that is going to work better when you have higher volume. And also, once you've got all of these things going, the workforce training is incredibly cool because now you can train people on 7 different industries all at the same time. We found maybe 7 or 8 different industries because the businesses that are members of the Reuse Innovation Center, they span a great they cover a lot of ground. And so you have the workforce training where you can train people to do 7 or 8 things all in the same training program. That's all I got on that.
Okay. And you want to talk about the Portland model and how it and why it worked, Dave?
Yeah, so here's what happened in Portland, Oregon. The citizens sort of rose up. They were seeing all of this demolition. They were seeing all of this greed and all of this waste and hazardous materials flying around. And they put their foot down and said, we're not going to put up this anymore. We hired you politicians, and government employees to take, care of us, and you better start doing that. So they actually demanded that something be done. And so the first phase was that, where they were complaining and organizing and trying to figure out what to do. The next thing was that the government, the city of Portland, started to reach out to citizens, to stakeholders, and meet with them and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? What would this look like? That's when I got involved. It was really early in the process, where they were, interviewing me and then hiring me to help facilitate this effort. What it was all about was, well, we don't want demolition anymore. How about deconstruction? What does deconstruction look like? Well, it's not dusty, it's not loud, it's not hazardous to the community, and it isn't wasteful. And so it was everything that the citizens wanted. Um, and it actually, when you deconstructed one building, it helped you repair 5 other buildings. So it kept other buildings that were in disrepair from becoming worse. And so that was a bonus that was realized. But to do this, we needed what they were talking about is essentially banning demolition under certain conditions within the city limits. And
Is that all
to
about the age of the building? Or was
yeah,
it other criteria?
because they needed some benchmark, some kind of, like what just said, how about if a building is 100 years old or older, that's when we'll deconstruct. And then that's phase 1, but phase 2 will be if it's 1940 or older, we will deconstruct. And then eventually the goal was to make it 1978 and older. And the reason they did this was so that we could take bite-sized pieces of the building removal market and see if we could handle that, we being the deconstruction industry. So to do that, we needed to train a bunch of contractors, and I trained all the contractors and all the workers, and eventually the deconstruction ordinance was passed and it was put in place, and buildings started getting deconstructed, and then and it worked well. So then they passed a second ordinance where it became 1940, where it stands today. And so about 2/3 of all of the homes or duplexes in the city of Portland, about 2/3 of them now have to be deconstructed. And um, we're really excited about that. I hope someday they get to the final third. But it was, the one thing, if I had, which I told them in the very beginning, I said, if you're going to do this, you are going to have to build up the infrastructure that these contractors need. And that was the one thing that, seemingly that they did wrong, which was not to listen to me. And they put all their money and effort into training contractors and getting the deconstruction started without really knowing where the material would go. And so the contractors in essence were often left to their own, like to figure it out for themselves, and that's really not a healthy approach. So of course the Reuse Innovation Center is the opposite. It's saying, we're building up the infrastructure first, and or we're building it up with the deconstruction industry together.
Okay. Dave, this is also you. Key site features of an Ulster Reuse Innovation Center that we've identified.
Yeah, and so, well, here's the thing. All of the reuse innovation centers that we are working on are, they have indoor space and they have outdoor space. Some of that outdoor space is covered, but not heated. And some of it's just a gravel lot, for example. And, you know, it's really important to us to keep it all affordable. We want a lot of space. I want all the space. If I had 7 acres, I wouldn't be happy. I would love to have a lot of space so I could take a lot of material. And as long as I stored it properly and kept it safe, we'd be able to divert a lot of material. So, but we can't afford a lot of material, so a lot of space, I mean, and so that's one of our key challenges. But when we bring in this material, we have a staging room where it gets put into before it goes into like the warehouse store, for example. Some would call it like a used Home Depot approach. You also have some of the materials that come in and they need some repairs. So like an appliance that's not quite working right, so then it goes to the repair station before it goes onto the sales floor. Other things that are present in the center, you have a training and education space, so like community classes, but also the workforce training that happens there. The tool library and the repair station are often, the idea is that they would be back to back or side to side because they are so connected in different ways. And so the tool library, I'm sure all know what that's about. The showroom is basically not a warehouse feel. It's more of a showroom. It's lower ceilings, better accent lighting and things like that. Carpets or rugs on the floor, not concrete. And it's an opportunity to display our partnering businesses work, like those reclaimed wood tables, for example. And where are those made? They're made in the work areas that are different sizes and equipped with different features. But they're often within the center, or they could be next door, or who knows what. The recycling area is probably partially outside and partially inside, or partially in covered area. And that's an area, that's just so we don't, anything that we generate, we don't want to send to the landfill either. So hopefully we have a lot of recycling options. We're also hoping that will have enough space to offer recycling options to the community, so that they have yet another option to make recycling easier for them. And the flex storage area is about saying, oh, one day I'm doing a kitchen remodel, the next day I'm doing a high school, and I need to have space that can adapt and accommodate these different material flows, because that's the way the waste stream works. It's changing every day. So of course, we're going to have a bathroom and kitchen that you have to accommodate space for that. Almost every building that I've looked at has had certainly had a bathroom, but a lot of them have had some kind of employee break room area, the kitchen. And yeah, so hopefully it's within 20 minutes of Ukra to keep in touch with that huge amount of the waste stream that travels through the Ulster Ukra, for example. And just, there's going to be lots of other things, but a loading dock would be like a nice feature to have if there is one, or we can afford it, or it has one. So anyway, just an example of some of the key site features.
Any questions or thoughts about that?
I have questions around, Dave, historically, how have you been able to acquire funding? Is that like state funding, county funding, private funding? What has that looked like for you?
Well, here's a lesson that I was trying to go for. This is my 31st year of doing this. When we started in 1993, we had a $25,000 grant. Even back then, that wasn't a lot of money. We used that money very wisely, and we tried to grow very quickly so that we wouldn't run out of money, frankly, right? And after that, we went 12 years without additional funding, okay? Without any cash donations, without any huge volunteers, or anything like that. And so what I realized from that was that I don't know how to run a nonprofit, because we were a nonprofit and you're supposed to ask for money, right? But I'm like, oh, I guess we don't know what we're doing, because we forgot to ask. But what we learned from that was that if you could do it without funding, Casey, right? Imagine what you could do with funding. So we were the ones that had to sacrifice. We were the ones that had to make it work. And so that we could show other people that you could make it work. And that's why I'm so confident in Ulster County's efforts here. Because why? Because we did it without funding. The Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center didn't get a dime from anyone. We didn't have any help. We don't have any deconstruction ordinance. Nobody donated any massive amount of material to us. We had to work for it. We had to pay rent. We found somewhere that was the one thing that if you would say we got a break was we found a place that was an affordable rent. And that probably is the one thing that made it all work for us. But now I can say that the Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center was unfunded, and therefore imagine what you could do with funding. And I think that if anything is fundable, this operation would fit into that category. There are so many things that we're doing. There are so many positives, right? We are we're doing the deconstruction thing. We are historic preservation, job training thing. Working in inner cities, working with disadvantaged population groups. On and on and on. All of these things that are a part of our everyday work. It really sounds fundable to me, and so guess what? The two in the last 2 weeks, the two operations, one in the Seattle area and one in central Washington state, they did get the funding. And it was state funding. And one of them was a state grant that was called a industrial symbiosis grant, where it was the Department of Commerce. Another one was a Department of Ecology, an environmental grant. And so, I don't feel like there's any limit on what we can get. EPA, we're working with the Office of Historic Preservation. And so all of these opportunities it's really exciting. But like I said, my role was to not do that so that I could prove proof of concept.
Well, it
Um,
sounds like you proved it because now you're doing it.
yeah, so now we're proving that we can get money too. So
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things that you may be going to bring it up later, but with the revenue model is the idea that the overhead, things like rent are a major expense. The businesses that participate have some access to supply chain and know how to source their stuff and sell their stuff. But I think Dave came up with the idea that public funding, one of the strategic things it could do would be to subsidize rent in sort of as to compensate for diversion, and rent discounts could even be pegged to how much the county would be saving in their diversion activities. Devil's in the details, but
yeah, no, that is that it's funny because it makes so much sense. If you go to Berkeley, California, and my friends at Urban Ore there, a for-profit, actually a for-profit business that is a multi-material diversion business. They have a crew that's stationed at the transfer station, the Berkeley, California transfer station. And every ton that transfer station sends to the garbage dump let's say it costs them $75 a ton. So every ton that Urban Ore diverts from the transfer station, they also get 75 a ton. It isn't costing the transfer station any extra money, but they are honoring the diversion effort by saying, hey, we were going to pay for this to be thrown away. We'd rather pay for it to be not thrown away. And so that's kind of like an example of that, where you're you're, you know, the government, whatever entity, whatever it is saying that they would, they'd rather divert that money to diversion. Because really, what most like Ulster County, Uckra, and all, what they're doing is they're throwing the money in the landfill, almost literally. You know,
Any other thoughts before we move on?
I could keep going, but I'm cognizant of time also, so I don't want to monopolize.
Oh, we don't want to cut you off either, but there's another opportunity later, so absolutely. Now we're going to get into the siting considerations that we're currently looking at. You've seen this before, but just as a reminder. And, you know, we went a little further and kind of tried to figure out how much of the internal building space would be dedicated to each function. And this gives you a better idea maybe of that. And, you know, the left side is the customer facing, and then the right side is the things that are kind of back office, if you want to call it that.
yeah, and I think that was so when I was basing the percentages of these different areas of the center, it was based on a 50,000 square foot facility. And so if you look at the mathematics of it, if it is a smaller facility, then these spaces take up different percentages because like a repair station, it looks relatively small, but it's actually a pretty good sized space in the center. But if your center was only 10,000 square feet, the repair station would probably have to lose some square footage just because there wouldn't be enough for everybody's, enough to go around, so to speak. I like this though, Barbara. It looks good.
Yeah, that worked out. So,
So is that
yeah,
mine or yours?
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Dave. I
Okay.
mean, there's going to be, now each of these three areas will be a slide in and of itself subsequent to this one. So just to understand that we, broke it down in this way between features, location, and economics considerations.
Somehow I got cut off there. What, uh,
You
should
got
I,
cut.
yeah, I mean, I lost the sound for a minute. Should I go ahead and talk about these three?
Sure. I was just mentioning that, each of these three will be a slide in itself subsequently, so you can, expound in more detail on them at that point if you want.
Okay, well, I'll just say that it took me 2 years, and I'm not exaggerating, it took me 2 years to find the current Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center location. I had these temporary locations before that, that actually were stretched for like 4 years. But the point is that I knew very specifically what I wanted. I hopefully it had certain features. I was worried about where its location was, and I was worried about the rent. So, if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. Just briefly, there's certain dependencies. These may not be the only ones, but they're things that we have to take into consideration. Obviously, we can be any location we want to be in, that'd be great, but there has to be an available site, and it has to meet certain characteristics, which we're defining here, and it has to be affordable, and it has to be available. And things come onto the real estate market and then they go away. And time marches on. So that's something we also are taking into consideration, because at this point we may identify all the characteristics we want of a site, but what will be available, will determine how closely we can hew to our plan and the specifics of it. But, you know, it's a lot about being adaptable. Funding us, you know, we've talked about, and that's something we're going to be doing more investigation of, what might be sources of funding. There may be state sources, uh, you know, other groups. Gretchen?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Dave or Barbara or Melissa, if there's a preference for rental versus purchasing outright, if something were to check the boxes in terms of, financial feasibility.
There really isn't a bias at this point. I mean, county, both the Department of the Environment who we are under contract with, the legislature's recycling oversight committee, and some other groups of legislators that are interested it's like a really good brain trust. But they, we will bake this for them, then they will bake this internally, and they will figure out what they have the financial appetite for.
Thanks.
You know, and another consideration is regulatory requirements. And we have to make sure that we have legislative support, and that obviously that can change too in terms of what the laws are. And we need to make sure that we're not making any mistakes in that regard. So Dave, here's location. This is for you.
Yeah. So what I did is I went on Google Maps, and I started doing the directions feature to see how far away Saugerties was and how far New Paltz was and things like that. And so we created a circle around Accra, for example, or Kingston, whatever. You get the idea. I mean, as far as like the location, that's what that circle is about, just saying. I'm
And it
sure
could
the
be proximate to Accra so that, you know, we're minimizing transportation and it's
yeah,
easy back and forth.
right, because there's already a county collection system for waste, right? And there's county collection systems for different types of recycling. And so we're not trying to duplicate some of that. We're just sometimes we're trying to tap into it. We're trying to go upstream, whatever. But we are really focused on being a good partner for Accra. So obviously, when we are always looking for these reuse innovation center locations, which now I have to look for 2 more, right? We're worried about zoning, because we don't want to build up something and find out later that we aren't allowed to do certain things, or somebody's saying, hey, that's too much noise or whatever. Not that we generate a lot of noise, but people always love to complain. So we're definitely worried about zoning. I think when we do searches like on LoopNet or whatever, we are looking at, certain zoning types. But I also know that if a county wants to do something, they can create exemptions for zoning in certain situations. So for the community good, right? Okay, so we talked about proximity, we talked about zoning. Now, this center is for everyone, okay? If you want to talk about sustainability and equity and affordability and all of those words, all of those itty words, I guess, you have to involve everyone in the process. So we want everyone to be involved. We want people that live in apartments to be involved. We want people who are looking for jobs to be involved, or people who can't afford new materials to be involved. And part of that is to be accessible, right? To be able to be near transit. And so that's a factor. We did look at some of these locations that were way out in the countryside. Maybe they were more affordable, yeah, but they're really hard to get to. So that really limited. As far as vehicle access goes, I can think of one or two centers where you can't even hardly pull a trailer up next to these reuse businesses, and we're trying to do volume. And so we want vehicle access to be a factor. We want traffic to be a factor. Like, we'd love it if it was on a main arterial where we're getting lots of eyes on it. It's doing its own marketing just by people driving by. And so, because we are going for a huge volume, more than any other innovation center so far. Also, foot traffic is great. If you can remove the barriers to people shopping there and donating there. We also expect lots of people to donate their materials instead of us having to always go and get them. And that it helps if you put it in a place where they can get to. So next slide. But one of the things that like I said, we struggle with now. I haven't had a partner like Ulster County before, and that may really help when it comes to the economics of this. But we, even if this is funded, I don't know if we can count on it always being funded. And so you want to create something that's more sustainable, and it lowers the barriers for new businesses to get involved. Because if the rent's high, then you have to charge your tenants high rent. And if the rent is low, then you can afford to give people a break in the beginning, maybe even keep it lower than what you're paying. That kind of idea. But there's two different prices that we talk about. One is, what is the price of the property that's for sale? And the other is, what is the monthly rent that we would expect to pay? Or looking at it from like, what is the monthly rent per square foot that you would expect to pay? And a lot of times that's based on indoor space, not necessarily outdoor gravel parking lot, or storage yard. Kind of that square footage may essentially be free. So is it in an area like an opportunity zone where it's where the owner could realize some kind of benefit, or we would be more likely to be able to receive grants based on our location? And so that's exciting to look at. Other strategic factors, I mean, I love the fact that I was able to rent my the Reuse Innovation Center in Bellingham. I was able to rent that facility until I had my feet on the ground, and then buy that facility. So now I am now, for the last 6 months, I've been investing in more infrastructure at our center, because I don't have to worry about being kicked out of there any other month. Because I own the property now. And of course, what about public versus private? We've looked at lots of different models, like in Wisconsin, where it would be another county-owned property, and they would provide a building or whatever. I mean, it's all about what kind of funding they can get, but reducing the startup costs and the overall monthly costs of these businesses is critical. If you want to see that result, you're investing in the landfill. Why not invest in diverting materials from landfill? Part of that is keeping the economics of these businesses affordable and profitable. So.
Okay, I think we got 13 minutes left, just as a time check. So here's some of the parameters that we looked at for the site selection. The lot characteristics, obviously they need to meet our needs, right? The size of the outdoor space, as David mentioned, and what's inside. Is it, how usable is the building for this purpose? Does it have everything it needs? Does it have sufficient power? Is it a good enough shape? High ceilings? ability to have equipment, ideally a loading dock, etc. Location we talked about, building type, how big it is, community access, and there has to be enough parking, of course, and usability, and Dave talked about cost. So these are the citing criteria that we came up with for, as we put it, a good enough reuse innovation center. 50,000 internal and 50,000 external square feet of space. Proximity to Accra, and we talked about proximity to transit. Zoning, probably light industrial, possibly manufacturing, but again, that depends on, what all we wind up including and how much Ulster might want to go into something more heavily manufacturing based, but of course that limits where we could go, and there are good arguments against doing that. We talk about funding, and then some details, that are useful: high ceilings, racking, readiness to install racking, access that Dave talked about for trucks and trailers, and high ratio of useful square footage to total square footage. So in other words, if you have a giant parking lot that's already paved, but a small building, that may not be all that usable, even though there may be a lot of overall square footage. Dave, this is a prioritization matrix that Dave came up with. We had prioritization matrices in the earlier phases as well, and they're very useful and very detailed, but they help come up with an overall score for how something works. And as we mentioned before, the real estate market is constantly changing, and what's available is constantly changing. And the idea here is this is kind of how we could evaluate sites. We don't know if any of these sites will be available by the time it's time to actually acquire a space for a reuse innovation center. But this gives you an idea, and I'm going to let Dave talk about it because it's his baby.
Yeah, when you're planning something and you're not ready, and you see the perfect building, and then it gets taken by someone else because you're a year away. We've already lost like 5 buildings that we've looked at, where they're now gone. They're no longer on the market. So I think it's really not it's not like we're worried about finding a building tomorrow. We're worried about, we want to inform everyone about this process, and have them keeping their eyes out, and saying, if we're all looking for a building, then maybe we're going to come across the right one, or maybe we'll find it before it even gets on the market, so we can snag it before anybody else hears about it. So this is really saying, like, what is a feature worth, so to speak. And it's really hard to pin down which building is better, and create a process to define that and say definitively, like, this building is the best or something like that. But it's an attempt at this process. So we started, by putting what is the perfect building. Well, it's the almost perfect building is really the first one listed there. And but we're used to adapting to buildings. We don't expect everything to be perfect. And we're not Home Depot, where we can locate wherever we want and we can build the perfect building. That's not our reality normally. And so if Ulster County wants to enable that by saying, here's the money, then we can reevaluate, but we'll still know what kind of building we want to create at that point. So next slide. So what do? You look at existing buildings and you say, well, here's what I like about this building. Here's what I don't like about this building. This iPark 87, the old Tech City in Kingston, it's a giant property and right in the middle of everything. Lots of access, you know, when it comes to buses and things like that. Big properties, sometimes big buildings, maybe not big buildings with outdoor space, but it looks to me like it's an area in flux, you know, that if we talk to the right people and we have the right support, that we could create the exact facility that we're looking for on that campus and benefit the city and achieve everything we want. It's close to UCRA as well. So it's just a matter of like how well, you know, like starting those conversations and saying who's ready to make this happen. Regarding the money part. And you say, well, what about the land? There's a undeveloped lot that's right beside UCRA. I mean, like literally attached to UCRA. And so we're looking at that as possibly being a collection facility, like to have a separate collection facility where materials are dropped off there, some, you know, some processing going on there before they go on to a now likely slightly smaller reuse innovation center. There's a building called the Metropolitan or the Metro. It's owned by the Novo Foundation. It's in a neighborhood. It's kind of like surrounded by homes and a park. And it's not on a major road, but it is this big brick building and has some potential. And but it, you know, it doesn't have the eyes on it like we'd like, but it is surrounded by homes, so we probably couldn't make a lot of noise there, but there are pluses and minuses, you know. This one huge building, like 95,000 square feet, this on Vineyard Avenue, it's in a more rural area, not a urban area, it's more of a rural area. It's pretty far from UCRA, for example. It's pretty far from, you know, population centers and things like that. But yeah, here's a pretty affordable for a huge building. It's pretty affordable. Not a lot of outdoor space, but you know, if you just listen to what I said about all four of those, they're all four different. There are pluses and minuses to every one of them. And that's kind of the process we're going through
Yeah,
right
that
now.
was like what makes this a complex activity, and we're also trying to hit a moving target.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so just to summarize a bit, there's a lot, but to summarize a bit, site requirements, you know, we know what they are. Dave has vast amount of experience with a lot of organizations. He knows what works from proven examples. It's an opportunity not just to divert materials, but to provide jobs and services to disadvantaged communities, lower costs. You know, we're going to continue to engage with stakeholders to make sure we're meeting the needs that they want and hearing them well so that we can give the proper recommendations to Ulster County and that Ulster County knows how to act. And, you know, working to identify funding sources and make sure that we're engaged with the proper regulatory organizations and that we understand their requirements so that we can meet them. And, you know, drill down on more of the details with regard to siting, for example, what kind of equipment that we should have, you know, get really as much detailed there as we can. And anything else I'm leaving out, Dave or Melissa?
I really think that's a question for the our several guests, because
Yes.
you know, beginner's mind and fresh perspectives are where the good questions come from. Yeah, well, not beginners, but beginners to this project.
Brings us to your thoughts.
I don't want to monopolize question. Do you have questions before I ask?
Go ahead. I'll join in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question is around how this business is structured, and you're asking a key stakeholder engagement, and I'm so curious to understand, like, how can Gretchen and I be engaged in this to help you all bring this to life in a more yeah, hands-on way, if there's opportunity for that. I think this is awesome. It seems like you're all headed in a really interesting direction. Just want to raise my hand and say happy to help any way I can.
Well, thank you. That is incredible. And I mean, I think Dave, you should talk about business model, that question, that aspect.
So the idea is to have, multiple businesses, right? And one of them is hopefully like a core anchor business that is the reuse store, let's say. But whatever it is that we're talking about, nothing happens unless we get people involved. We are, we are definitely actively looking for people who want to participate, and not just saying, hey, I'll recycle my building materials there or something like that, but actually participate in starting a business that that is part of the center. So I think anybody who knows anybody else who might be interested in participating on a business level, like to actually do this kind of work, diversion work, and remanufacturing, repair, any of that. That's huge. If anybody knows of any buildings that we haven't heard of for some reason, that would be great. I think we're getting to that phase where that kind of input is really important.
And we are going to have next session on August 1st, especially for entrepreneurs. So if you know anyone, and I would, invite both of you to attend that one.
Totally. Yeah, I would be happy to do that.
I guess the other just point of clarification about where things stand is that Ulster County has funded this. So Ulster County owns this. So Ulster County has never once ever started a reuse innovation center, and Dave has. So we think it's likely that Ulster County will want to keep us around,
Sure.
but that is for Ulster County to determine. And, it's been really, I haven't done this extensively like Dave has, but I do sense that it's pretty unique that county staff and several legislative committees have really pushed us to be incredibly nerdy and incredibly, stating blinding flashes of the obvious so that there is a seamless case made for this. But, that said, what the county does with it is for the county legislature and the county executive branch to figure out, and we'll share as much as we know.
Awesome. No, that's really, really helpful. Yeah, I was wondering if is this like a for-profit business? Is this a nonprofit? But it seems like it's governmental in some ways because it's owned by the.
Well, Dave's model is completely private, for-profit. It's an ecosystem of businesses with a centrally,
Right.
kind of lead business. The county could put out an RFP to support something to support that.
Got it.
Cool.
Cool.
It's just completely a blank, it's a menu of options for them to weigh.
So interesting. Awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I have experience in the B Corp world, like cooperative sort of realm. So yeah, really curious how that shakes out for them if they want to, open it up. Would be excited to learn more about that as you learn more about that.
Yeah, well, this distribution list will definitely stay in the loop.
Just congratulations. I think I joined the very first call that you did, Melissa, months ago, earlier this year. And so to see how far,
months ago.
Yeah, so to see how far this has gotten in a pretty quick time is really exciting. So congratulations. And I just from a background perspective, I'm curious how much deconstruction, if any, goes on formally, informally in Ulster County right now.
We think not very darn much.
Okay.
What do you think, Dave?
No, that's exactly right. We couldn't really find any. We couldn't find a whole lot of new construction either, which is curious.
Oh, huh.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
you know-
there's been this move of people from New York City up to Ulster County inflating the housing prices and all
Sure.
that stuff. But then there's also been a move for people to farther, more rural. So there's been a net little bit of population decrease after all the shakeout. And we have had a number of contractors come up to us and say, there's a lot of construction debris out there that we could probably help you find what people are doing with it. So that's our short list of next calls to make.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would love to circle back around with you off this call and just talk about some ways that we could get you involved in crowd and the work that we're doing statewide, either through speaking to, we have a monthly speaking series, and there's all sorts of other things that we're doing. And the fact that you're the first, as far as we know, that are doing this building materials reuse center in New York State is really, it's really momentous. So really exciting, and excited to see where it goes as next steps. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much for participating and all of your enthusiastic and helpful comments. Here's our contact info.
Okay.
Really appreciate it all. Thank you for engaging with us with this. This is
Yes.
And thank you for engaging with us.
for sure.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. I'm back to diverting material.